The morning my life fell apart started like any other Tuesday. I stood at my kitchen window, a steaming mug of coffee warming my hands, watching the early light creep across my garden. At 62, I'd created a life of modest comfort after decades of careful saving and planning. By noon that same day, I would discover my own son had betrayed me in ways I couldn't have imagined, and by the end of the month, I would be the one who sent him to prison. My name is Eleanor Winters. After 40 years of teaching high school English, I'd been enjoying retirement for just over 2 years. My husband, Richard, had passed away 5 years earlier from a heart attack, leaving me alone in the three-bedroom colonial we'd purchased when our son Marcus was just a baby. The house was paid off, my retirement account was healthy, and I had what I thought was a good relationship with my only child. I couldn't have been more wrong. The phone rang as I was rinsing my mug in the sink. The caller ID showed First National Bank, and I answered without hesitation. Mrs. Winters? This is Diane from the fraud department at First National. I'm calling because we've noticed some unusual activity on your accounts. My stomach tightened. What kind of activity? There have been several large withdrawals over the past 2 weeks. Yesterday, someone attempted to take out $20,000 from your retirement savings account. We flagged it because it didn't match your usual patterns. I gripped the counter to steady myself. I didn't authorize any withdrawals. I was afraid of that, Diane said, her voice softening. I need you to come to the branch as soon as possible. Bring your ID and any financial documents you have. We need to investigate this immediately. An hour later, I sat across from Diane and the bank manager, staring at statements that showed my life savings being systematically drained. 4 withdrawals over 3 weeks, totaling nearly $70,000. My retirement fund, which I'd built penny by penny over decades of careful saving, had been nearly halved. How could this happen? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I keep my financial information secure. I don't share my passwords with anyone. The manager, a man named Robert with kind eyes and graying temples, slid a document across the desk. This is the withdrawal slip from the first transaction. The signature looks remarkably like yours, and the person presented proper identification. I stared at the signature. It was close to mine, close enough to fool someone who didn't know better. But there were subtle differences. A slight hesitation in the curve of the E, a sharper angle to the W than I would make. That's not my signature, I said firmly, and I haven't been in this branch in over a month. We have security footage, Diane said gently. Would you be willing to look at it? It might help us identify who's behind this. I nodded, though dread was pooling in my stomach. Something told me I already knew what I was about to see. In the small conference room, Robert queued up the security footage on a laptop. The timestamp showed 3 weeks ago, a Wednesday afternoon. The camera angle captured the teller window from behind, showing the back of a customer's head and shoulders as they conducted their business. This is the first withdrawal, Robert explained. $15,000. The customer turned slightly, and I caught a glimpse of his profile. My heart stopped. Marcus, my son. The room tilted slightly, and I gripped the edge of the table. That's my son, I whispered. Robert and Diane exchanged glances. Are you certain? Robert asked. Yes, that's Marcus, my only child. They showed me 3 more clips, each showing Marcus at different branches, making withdrawals from my accounts. In the last one, from yesterday, he was wearing the blue sweater I'd given him for Christmas. Mrs. Winters, Diane said carefully, did you authorize your son to access your accounts? No, I said, my voice stronger now, anger beginning to replace shock. I did not. Marcus has his own account here. We've never had joint accounts, not since he was in college. In cases like this, Robert said, where the fraud is committed by a family member, Many people prefer to handle it privately. However, I need to inform you that what we're looking at is identity theft and bank fraud. These are serious crimes. What are my options? I asked, feeling suddenly very old and very tired. You can file a police report, which would initiate a criminal investigation. The bank will cooperate fully with law enforcement. Or you can choose not to pursue criminal charges, but in that case, the bank cannot restore your funds. How much is gone? I asked. $72,500, Diane replied softly. The number hit me like a physical blow. That money represented years of careful saving, of brown bag lunches and delayed gratification. It was meant to see me through my remaining years, to pay for any medical care I might need as I aged. Without it, my future was suddenly precarious. I need to think, I said, gathering my purse. How long do I have to decide? We'll need to know by the end of the week, Robert said. And Mrs. Winters, I'm truly sorry this has happened to you. I nodded, unable to speak around the lump in my throat. The drive home was a blur. My mind raced through possibilities, excuses, explanations. Maybe Marcus was in some kind of trouble. Maybe he intended to pay it back. Maybe there was some misunderstanding. But the security footage didn't lie. My son had walked into multiple bank branches, pretended to be acting on my behalf, and systematically emptied my accounts. At home, I sat in my silent kitchen, staring at my phone. I should call him, confront him, demand answers, but something held me back. If I tipped him off, would he run? Would he destroy evidence? And deeper than these practical concerns was a wound so profound I could barely acknowledge it. My only child had betrayed me in the most fundamental way. Instead of calling Marcus, I called my oldest friend, Patricia. We'd taught at the same high school for 30 years, and she knew Marcus almost as well as I did. He did what? Patricia's voice rose in disbelief when I explained the situation. He's been stealing from me, Pat, using my identity. The bank showed me the footage. There has to be some explanation, she said, though her voice lacked conviction. Marcus has always been, well, a bit entitled, but this is criminal. I know, I said, tears finally breaking free. I don't understand. I gave him everything I could. I put him through college. I helped with the down payment on his condo. What more did he want? Have you noticed anything unusual lately? Has he seemed desperate or in trouble? I thought about our recent interactions. Marcus had visited for Sunday dinner just 2 weeks ago, bringing an expensive bottle of wine and talking excitedly about a promotion at work. Nothing had seemed amiss. No, I said. In fact, he seemed to be doing well. He mentioned a bonus at work, said he was thinking about trading in his car for a newer model. Patricia was quiet for a moment. Ellie, you need to call the police. He's my son, Pat. Yes, and he's a grown man who stole your life savings. This isn't a teenager who took $20 from your purse. This is a 35-year-old man who committed identity theft against his own mother. I knew she was right, but taking that step felt impossible. I need to talk to him first. I need to understand why. Be careful, Patricia warned. Don't meet him alone, and don't let him know that you know about the bank yet. See what he says. After we hung up, I texted Marcus, "Can you come over for dinner tonight? Need to talk to you about something important." His reply came quickly. "Sure, Mom. Everything okay? Just need your advice on something. See you at 6? He sent back a thumbs-up emoji, and I set my phone down, my hands shaking. The hours until 6 o'clock crawled by. I made a simple dinner spaghetti with meat sauce, Marcus's favorite since childhood, though I knew I wouldn't be able to eat. I set the table, poured myself a glass of wine, and waited. Marcus arrived precisely at 6, letting himself in with the key I'd given him after Richard died. "Something smells good," he called from the entryway. He appeared in the kitchen doorway, and I studied him as if seeing him for the first time. My son was handsome, with his father's height and my dark eyes. He was dressed well in slacks and a button-down shirt, his dark hair neatly styled. He looked successful, confident, not like someone desperate enough to steal from his own mother. "Hey, Mom," he said, bending to kiss my cheek. "What's this important thing you wanted to talk about?" I gestured to the table. "Let's eat first." Throughout dinner, I watched him eat heartily and chat about work, about a woman he'd started dating, about plans to take a vacation to the Bahamas next month. Each casual mention of spending money felt like a knife twisting in my chest. Finally, as I served coffee at the kitchen table, I took a deep breath. "Marcus, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." His expression turned concerned. "Of course, Mom. What is it? Are you in some kind of trouble? Financial trouble, or maybe gambling debts? Something that would make you desperate for money?" His brow furrowed. "No, nothing like that. Why would you ask that?" "Because," I said, my voice remarkably steady, "someone has been withdrawing large sums from my accounts. The bank called me today." I watched his face carefully. There was a flicker, just the briefest flash of something before his expression settled into concern. "That's terrible, Mom. Did they say who it was? Do they have any leads?" He was going to lie to me. My own son was sitting across from me, feigning concern, when he was the one who had stolen from me. The realization crystallized something inside me, a hardening of resolve I hadn't known I possessed. "They have security footage," I said, still watching him. "They're going to identify the person responsible." Now there was definite alarm in his eyes. "Well, that's good, right? They'll catch whoever did this." "Marcus," I said quietly, "I saw the footage. It was you." The silence that followed was absolute. Marcus stared at me, his coffee cup halfway to his lips, frozen in place. "I don't know what you're talking about," he finally said, but his voice had lost its confidence. "Don't lie to me," I said, and now my voice was shaking with anger. "I saw you on the security cameras. 4 different branches, 4 different withdrawals. You were wearing the blue sweater I gave you for Christmas in yesterday's footage." He set the cup down slowly. "Mom, I can explain." "Please do," I said, folding my hands in front of me. "Explain to me why my son stole $72,000 from me." His face went through a rapid series of expressions: shock at the amount, had he not kept track, calculation, and then a settling into what I recognized as his persuasive mode. Marcus had always been charming when he wanted something. "It's not what you think," he began. "I did make those withdrawals, yes, but it wasn't stealing. I was investing the money for you. I found this amazing opportunity at a tech startup that's going to revolutionize the industry. The returns are going to be incredible, Mom. I was going to surprise you with it." The lie was so transparent, so insulting to my intelligence, that for a moment I couldn't speak. "You expect me to believe that?" I finally managed. "You forged my signature. You pretended to be acting on my behalf. You didn't say a word to me about any investment." "I was waiting until I had good news to share," he insisted. "The paperwork is at my place. I can show you everything." "Stop lying," I said, my voice breaking. "The bank is filing a fraud report. They have you on camera, Marcus. This isn't going away with one of your stories." His demeanor changed then, the charm falling away. "You called the bank? You're reporting me?" There was accusation in his voice, as if I was the one who had done something wrong. "They called me," I corrected. "When someone tries to withdraw $20,000 from an account, it raises flags." "So what now?" he asked, his voice hardening. "You're going to press charges against your own son." "I don't know," I admitted. "I wanted to hear what you had to say first. I wanted to understand why." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his father that it made my heart ache. It's not like you need all that money, Mom. You live simply, your house is paid off. Meanwhile, I'm trying to build a life in an economy that's stacked against my generation. The entitlement in his words stunned me. That money is my security, Marcus. It's what I have to live on for the rest of my life. What happens if I get sick? What happens if I need long-term care? He waved a dismissive hand. You're healthy as a horse, and anyway, that's what Medicare is for. Medicare doesn't cover everything, I said, incredulous at his cavalier attitude. And that's beside the point. That money was mine. You had no right to take it. I was going to pay it back, he insisted. With interest. When? I demanded. And with what? You just told me you're struggling financially. He had no answer for that. The truth, Marcus. For once in your life, tell me the truth. What did you do with my money? He looked away, jaw tight. Some of it went to pay off credit card debt. Some went to invest in cryptocurrency. And some... He hesitated. Some... what? Some went toward a down payment on a boat. I stared at him, disbelieving. A boat? You stole my retirement savings to buy a boat. It's an investment, he said defensively. Boats hold their value. I stood up, needing to put distance between us. I want you to leave. I'll pay you back over time. And the money you invested in cryptocurrency, can you get that back? He shifted uncomfortably. The market's down right now, but... Just stop, I said, holding up a hand. I can't listen to any more of this. You need to leave my house. What are you going to do? He asked, standing as well. There was fear in his voice now. I don't know yet, I said honestly. But I need you to go while I figure it out. Mom, please, don't do anything hasty. We're family. The word family in his mouth made something snap inside me. Family doesn't steal from family, Marcus. Family doesn't lie and manipulate and forge signatures. You didn't treat me like family, so don't invoke that bond now when it's convenient for you. He stared at me, perhaps truly seeing me for the first time in years, not as just his mother, an endless resource to be tapped, but as Eleanor Winters, a woman who had worked hard her entire life and would not be taken advantage of any longer. We'll figure this out. After he left, I sank onto the couch, emotionally exhausted. The house felt too quiet, too empty. I thought about calling Patricia back, but decided against it. This was a burden I needed to carry alone for now. The next morning, after a sleepless night, I made my decision. I drove to the police station, a small brick building in the center of town. Inside, I asked to speak to someone about reporting identity theft. The officer who took my statement was young enough to be my grandson, with kind eyes and a patient manner. He listened without interruption as I explained what had happened, only asking clarifying questions when necessary. And you're certain you want to file this report? He asked when I had finished. You understand that this will likely result in criminal charges against your son? I understand, I said, my voice steady despite the churning in my stomach. I need to do this. As I signed the official statement, I thought about the years ahead. Would Marcus ever forgive me for this? Would I ever forgive him? I didn't know. But I did know that I couldn't allow him to face no consequences for what he'd done. Not just for my sake, but for his. He needed to understand that actions have repercussions, a lesson I had apparently failed to teach him earlier in life. The officer assured me that they would investigate promptly and that the bank had already provided them with a security footage. He explained the process show they would gather evidence, how charges would be filed, how the court proceedings would unfold. It might be a good idea to change your locks, he suggested gently, and review all your accounts for any other unauthorized activity. I nodded, taking his card with the case number written on the back. As I stood to leave, he added, Mrs. Winters, I know this wasn't an easy decision, but you're doing the right thing. I wasn't sure if that was true, but I thanked him anyway. In the parking lot, I sat in my car for a long time, staring at the police station and wondering what would happen next. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Can we talk today? I didn't respond. There would be time for talking later, after he understood the gravity of what he had done. For now, I needed to protect myself and what remained of my savings. Driving home, I passed the elementary school where Marcus had once been a student, the park where I'd pushed him on the swings, the ice cream shop where we'd celebrated his good report cards. Memories flooded back: his first steps, his high school graduation, the proud look on his face when he got his first real job. Where had I gone wrong? Had I given him too much or not enough? Had losing his father affected him more deeply than I realized? Or was there something fundamental in his character that I had missed, some flaw that had been there all along? I didn't have answers to these questions, and maybe I never would. But I knew that by the end of the day, my son would learn that his actions had consequences. He would learn that I was not just his mother, but a person with rights and dignity, and perhaps, in time, he would learn to be a better man because of it. As I pulled into my driveway, my phone rang. It was the officer from the station. Mrs. Winters, we've made contact with your son. He's being brought in for questioning now. And so it began the process that would eventually lead to my son's arrest, trial, and imprisonment. A process that would test my resolve, break my heart, and ultimately force both of us to reckon with the truth of who we were and what we owed each other. The day they arrested Marcus was unseasonably cold for April. I stood at my living room window, watching rain streak down the glass, when my phone rang. It was Detective Harmon, the officer who had taken over my case. Mrs. Winters, we've taken your son into custody. He's being processed now. His words should have brought relief, but instead, they hollowed me out. I thanked him mechanically and hung up, sinking into the armchair Richard had always favored. The house creaked around me, empty and accusing. 2 weeks had passed since I'd filed the police report. 2 weeks of Marcus calling, texting, even showing up at my door once, pleading for me to drop the charges. Each time I'd remained firm, though it cost me dearly. Patricia had been my rock, coming over with casseroles and sitting with me through tearful evenings when I questioned everything. You're doing what needs to be done, she'd reassured me. He made his choices. Now, with Marcus actually arrested, those words felt both true and woefully inadequate. My phone buzzed again. A text from a number I didn't recognize. Mom, they're letting me make one call. Please come down to the station. I need you. I stared at the message until the screen went dark. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let him face this moment alone as punishment for what he'd done. But a larger part, the part that had held him as a colicky infant, bandaged his skinned knees, and celebrated his triumphs, couldn't abandon him now. I grabbed my purse and keys. The police station was busier than it had been when I'd filed my report. I approached the front desk, suddenly conscious of how I must look: a 62-year-old woman with red-rimmed eyes and yesterday's clothes. I'm Eleanor Winters, I told the officer at the desk. My son Marcus was brought in earlier. He asked me to come. The officer checked something on his computer. He's being processed. You can wait over there. He pointed to a row of plastic chairs against the wall. I sat, watching officers and civilians move through the space with purpose. After about 20 minutes, Detective Harmon appeared. Mrs. Winters, he said, taking the seat beside me. I appreciate you coming in. This can't be easy for you. Is he all right? I asked. He's cooperating, Harmon replied, which wasn't really an answer. We've charged him with identity theft, bank fraud, and grand larceny. The evidence is quite clear. What happens now? He'll be arraigned tomorrow morning. The judge will set bail. Given the amount stolen and the clear evidence, I expect it will be substantial. I nodded, trying to process this information. Can I see him? Detective Harmon hesitated. That's up to you. He's asked to speak with you. But I should warn you, these conversations can be difficult. And anything you discuss isn't privileged, it could potentially be used in court. I understand, I said, though I wasn't sure I did. Everything about this situation felt surreal, as if I'd stepped into someone else's life. Take as much time as you need. When the door opened again, I barely recognized my son. Marcus had always been meticulous about his appearance, but now his hair was disheveled, his eyes bloodshot. He wore an orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on his frame. "Mom," he said, his voice cracking. "You came." "Of course I came," I replied, though we both knew it hadn't been a certainty. He sat across from me, hands folded on the table. I noticed they were trembling slightly. The number struck me like a physical blow. I'd known there would be consequences, but hearing the potential sentence made it real in a way it hadn't been before. "You should have thought about that before you stole from me," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I know." He looked down at his hands. "I messed up. Badly. But Mom, please, you can still drop the charges. Tell them you don't want to pursue this." I shook my head. "It's too late for that. The bank has its own fraud charges. And even if I could, Marcus, you took $72,000 from me. What did you think would happen?" "I don't know," he admitted. "I wasn't thinking long term. It started small, just $5,000 to cover some debts. But then it was so easy, and I thought I could double the money with some investments, pay you back before you ever noticed." "But you didn't invest at all, did you? You bought a boat." The anger I'd been suppressing rose to the surface. "A boat, Marcus?" While I was clipping coupons and worrying about heating bills. He had the grace to look ashamed. "The boat was stupid. I was trying to impress Vanessa." "Vanessa?" "The woman I've been seeing. She comes from money. Her ex had a yacht, and I wanted to compete with that." I stared at him, this stranger who was my son. "So you stole your mother's retirement savings to impress a woman? Do you hear yourself?" "It sounds terrible when you put it that way." "It is terrible," I said. "It's who you've become, and I don't understand it. Your father and I didn't raise you to be this person." At the mention of his father, Marcus's face crumpled. Dad would be so disappointed in me. "Yes," I agreed, unable to soften this truth. "He would." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of Richard's absent judgment hanging between us. "The arraignment is tomorrow," Marcus finally said. "They'll set bail. I don't have enough for whatever they'll ask." I understood what he wasn't saying. He wanted me to post his bail to use what remained of my savings to get him out of jail. "I can't help you with bail," I said quietly. "Even if I wanted to, that money needs to last me the rest of my life. You've already taken too much of it." "So you're just going to leave me here?" There was a note of disbelief in his voice, as if he still couldn't quite comprehend that I wouldn't rescue him. "You put yourself here," I reminded him. "And yes, you'll have to stay until trial unless you can figure something out." I looked at his outstretched hand, but didn't take it. "I believe that you're sorry you got caught. I'm not sure you're sorry for what you did." His face hardened slightly, confirming my suspicion. "What do you want from me? I've apologized. I've admitted I was wrong." "I want you to understand why it was wrong," I said. "Not just because it was illegal or because you got caught, but because of what it did to me, to us." "I do understand," he insisted. "No, you don't. You haven't asked me once how I'm managing without that money. You haven't asked if I'm okay, if I can pay my bills, if I'm sleeping at night. It's still all about you, Marcus." He looked stricken. Are you okay?" The question came too late, prompted rather than genuine. Still, I answered honestly. No, I'm not. I've had to take out a reverse mortgage on the house to cover my expenses. I've canceled my supplemental health insurance because I can't afford the premiums. I'm terrified of getting sick because one hospital stay would wipe me out completely. My voice shook with emotion I'd been holding back. And beyond the money, I've lost my son. The person I thought you were doesn't exist. Marcus's eyes filled with tears. I'm still your son. Are you? Because the son I thought I had would never have done this to me. A knock at the door interrupted us. An officer poked his head in. Time's up, Mrs. Winters. Mom, Marcus said desperately as I turned to leave. I love you. Please remember that. I paused at the door. I love you too, Marcus. That's why this hurts so much. The drive home was a blur. Inside my house, the house that was no longer fully mine thanks to the reverse mortgage, I moved through the rooms like a ghost. In the study, I found myself standing before the bookshelf where we kept our family photo albums. I pulled one down, opening to images of Marcus as a child gap-toothed and grinning on his first day of school, serious-faced as he built a science fair project, triumphant on the Little League field. When had that boy become the man who could steal from his own mother? The phone rang, startling me. It was Patricia. I just heard from Beth at the bank, she said without preamble. Beth was her niece, who worked as a teller. Is it true they arrested Marcus today? Yes, I confirmed, too emotionally drained to be surprised that news had traveled so quickly. The arraignment is tomorrow. Oh, Ellie. Her voice was full of sympathy. Do you want me to come over? Or you could stay here tonight. You shouldn't be alone. I'm fine, I lied. I need some time to process everything. Did you see him? At the station? Yes, he wanted me to drop the charges, and when I wouldn't, he asked me to pay his bail. Patricia made a sound of disbelief. The nerve of that boy, after what he did to you. You've always been there to catch him, Patricia pointed out gently. Maybe that's part of the problem. Her words stung because they contained a truth I'd been avoiding. Had I enabled Marcus's sense of entitlement, had my maternal protection prevented him from developing a moral compass? I did my best, I said defensively. Of course you did. Patricia backtracked. I didn't mean to imply otherwise. It's just, sometimes our children make choices we can't understand, despite our best efforts. After we hung up, I continued flipping through the photo album, stopping at a picture of Marcus at his college graduation. Richard and I stood on either side of him, our faces glowing with pride. Richard had been gone just a year later, leaving me to navigate our son's adulthood alone. Had I failed? The question haunted me as I prepared for bed, moving through my evening routine mechanically. I'd always thought I was doing right by Marcus supporting his dreams, celebrating his successes, helping when he struggled. But perhaps in my determination to be both mother and father after Richard died, I'd overcompensated, shielding him from consequences he needed to face. Sleep eluded me. Around 2 in the morning, I gave up and went downstairs to make tea. As the kettle boiled, I noticed the light blinking on my answering machine. I rarely used the landline anymore, but I kept it for emergencies. I pressed play, expecting a telemarketer. Instead, I heard a woman's voice, unfamiliar and hesitant. Mrs. Winters? This is Vanessa Chen. I was seeing your son Marcus. I just heard what happened, and I think we should talk. I have some information that might be relevant. Please, call me when you can. She left her number, and I scribbled it down, my hand shaking slightly. Vanessa. The woman Marcus had been trying to impress with my money. I was tempted to call her back immediately, despite the hour, but caution prevailed. I needed to be clear-headed for this conversation. The next morning, after a fitful few hours of sleep, I dressed carefully for the arraignment. I chose a simple navy dress and my good pearl earrings, a gift from Richard on our 25th anniversary. I wanted to look dignified, composed. I wanted the judge to see me as a victim deserving of justice, not just a mother betraying her son. Before leaving, I called the number Vanessa had left. "Mrs. Winters," she answered on the second ring, as if she'd been waiting for my call. "Thank you for getting back to me." "You said you had information," I said, skipping pleasantries. "About Marcus." "Yes," she paused. "I think it would be better to meet in person. Are you free this afternoon, after the arraignment?" I was surprised she knew about the court appearance. "How did you?" "Marcus called me from the station yesterday," she explained. "Before they took his phone, he's been telling me a lot of things that don't add up. That's why I wanted to talk to you." We arranged to meet at a cafe near the courthouse at 2 o'clock. I hung up, more unsettled than before. What did this woman know? And why was she reaching out to me now? The courthouse was an imposing stone building in the center of town. Inside, I followed signs to the courtroom where Marcus would be arraigned. Detective Harmon had explained that the proceeding would be brief, just a formal reading of the charges and the setting of bail. I slipped into a bench at the back, not wanting to be too visible. There were about a dozen other cases before Marcus's, a parade of human misery and poor choices. I watched as each defendant was brought in, charges read, pleas entered, bail set or denied. The proceedings moved with assembly line efficiency, each case taking only a few minutes. When they called State versus Marcus Winters, my heart jumped. Marcus was let in, still wearing the orange jumpsuit. He looked around the courtroom, his eyes finding me almost immediately. I gave a small nod but maintained my distance. The charges were red identity theft, bank fraud, grand larceny. The prosecutor outlined the case briefly, emphasizing the breach of trust and the significant amounts stolen. When asked how he pled, Marcus's voice was barely audible as he said, "Not guilty." I closed my eyes briefly. Even now, facing overwhelming evidence, he couldn't admit what he'd done. The judge set bail at $100,000. Marcus's public defender argued for a reduction, citing his lack of prior criminal record and ties to the community. The judge was unmoved, and I felt a small, vindictive satisfaction at that. As they led Marcus away, he looked back at me once more. The desperation in his eyes tugged at my heart, but I remained seated, watching him disappear through the side door. Outside the courthouse, I sat in my car for a long time, collecting myself before my meeting with Vanessa. I still wasn't sure what to expect from this encounter, but curiosity propelled me forward. The cafe was busy with the lunch crowd when I arrived. I spotted a young woman sitting alone by the window, checking her watch nervously. She was striking, tall and slender, with long dark hair and the kind of bone structure that photographers love. I understood immediately why Marcus had been eager to impress her. "Vanessa?" I approached her table. She stood quickly, extending her hand. "Mrs. Winters, thank you for meeting me." We sat, ordering coffee from a harried waitress. Up close, Vanessa looked tired, with shadows under her eyes and a tension in her shoulders. "I was at the arraignment," she said once our coffees arrived. "In the back. I didn't want to intrude, but I needed to see for myself." "See what?" "If it was true, if Marcus really did what they're saying." She wrapped her hands around her mug. "We've been dating for about 6 months. He's always been generous. Extravagant even. The boat, expensive restaurants, a weekend trip to Napa. I thought he was just successful." "And now?" I prompted when she fell silent. "Now I'm wondering if I was dating a lie." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small velvet box, sliding it across the table to me. "He gave me this last week. Said it was a family heirloom, his grandmother's." I opened the box with trembling fingers. Inside was my mother's sapphire ring, the one I kept in my jewelry box for special occasions. I hadn't even noticed it was missing. This was my mother's, I confirmed, my voice tight. I never gave it to Marcus. Winters. He told me he was investing in a tech startup, that he stood to make millions. He asked me if I wanted to invest too. Cold dread washed over me. Did you give him money? $20,000, she admitted, looking down. My entire savings. He promised it would double within 6 months. I closed my eyes briefly, absorbing this new betrayal. There is no startup, is there? I don't think so. When I heard he'd been arrested for stealing from you, I started making calls. None of the companies he mentioned exist. We sat in silence for a moment, two women united in their betrayal by the same man. I'm so sorry, I finally said. About your money, and about all of this. It's not your fault, Vanessa said quickly. You're as much a victim as I am. More so, actually. He's your son. Yes, I agreed heavily. He is. This was new information. Gambling? Vanessa nodded. Online mostly, but sometimes at the casino in Hammond. He would disappear for a weekend and come back either flush with cash or deeply depressed. I think he has a problem. The pieces were starting to fit together, the escalating thefts, the desperate need for money, the web of lies. Marcus wasn't just a son who had betrayed his mother. He was a man spiraling out of control. I want to help, Vanessa said, surprising me. I can testify about what he told me, about the investments and the gambling. It might strengthen your case. Why would you do that? I asked. You could just walk away from all of this. She touched the velvet box that still sat between us. Because what he did was wrong, and because I believe in facing consequences. She hesitated. And because I liked you the moment I saw you in that courtroom, sitting there with your back straight and your head high, doing the hardest thing a mother could do. I felt tears prick my eyes at her unexpected kindness. Thank you. As we parted ways outside the cafe, Vanessa handed me a business card. I'm a financial advisor, she explained. When all this is over, I'd like to help you figure out how to rebuild what he took. Pro bono, of course. I tucked the card into my purse, touched by the offer. I'd like that. Driving home, my mother's ring safely in my pocket, I felt a strange mix of emotions. The discovery of Marcus's gambling and his scamming of Vanessa added new layers to his betrayal. This wasn't just about me anymore, it was about a pattern of behavior that needed to be stopped before he hurt more people. And yet, learning about his gambling addiction also provided a context I hadn't had before. Was Marcus sick, rather than simply selfish? Did that change my responsibility as his mother? As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed a familiar car parked on the street, Patricia's old Volvo. She was sitting on my porch steps, waiting for me. I brought dinner, she said as I approached, holding up a grocery bag. And I'm not taking no for an answer this time. You shouldn't be alone tonight. I didn't argue. As we walked into the house together, I realized that while Marcus had betrayed me, I wasn't without support. I had Patricia, and now, unexpectedly, Vanessa. I had my own strength, forged through decades of life's challenges. And I had the truth, uncomfortable and painful as it was. The truth about my son, about the choices he had made, and about the choices I now needed to make in response. The path ahead would not be easy, but for the first time since this ordeal began, I felt capable of walking it. That night, as Patricia and I sat in my kitchen sharing a bottle of wine, I told her about meeting Vanessa and what I had learned. Gambling, Patricia said, shaking her head. That explains a lot, but it doesn't excuse anything. No, I agreed. It doesn't, but it helps me understand. What will you do now? I took a sip of wine, considering. I'm going to see this through, the trial, the testimony, all of it. Marcus needs to face consequences, real ones, not just another bailout from Mom. Maybe that's the only way he'll ever change. Patricia reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You're doing the right thing, Ellie. It's the hardest right thing I've ever seen, but it's right all the same. As we cleared the dishes and prepared for bed, I thought about the arraignment, about Marcus pleading not guilty despite the overwhelming evidence. I thought about Vanessa and her lost savings, about the other potential victims out there. And I thought about my son boy he had been, the man he had become, and the person he might yet be if he could face the truth of what he had done. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There would be meetings with prosecutors, evidence to review, decisions to make about testifying against my own child. But tonight, I allowed myself to rest, secure in the knowledge that I was finally doing what needed to be done, not just for me, but for Marcus too. 3 months after Marcus's arraignment, I sat in my attorney's office, reviewing the prosecution's evidence. Summer had come and gone, leaving behind a trail of postponed court dates and legal maneuvering. Through it all, I had maintained my resolve, though each day brought new challenges to my determination. They've offered a plea deal, said Evelyn Marsh, the district attorney assigned to my case. She was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a reputation for thoroughness. 15 months in a minimum security facility, 5 years probation, and full restitution. What does Marcus say? I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. He's rejected it, Evelyn replied, confirming my suspicion. He still maintains he was borrowing the money with intent to repay. His attorney is pushing for probation only, maybe some community service. I shook my head, disappointment settling like a stone in my stomach. Even now, facing a trial and overwhelming evidence, Marcus couldn't bring himself to admit what he had done. The trial is set for October 15th, Evelyn continued. About 6 weeks from now, we need to prepare you for your testimony. October 15th. The date struck me with unexpected force. It would have been Richard's 70th birthday. My husband had been gone for 7 years, but in moments like this, his absence felt raw and new. What would he have said about all this? What would he have advised me to do? Mrs. Winters? Evelyn's voice pulled me back to the present. Are you all right? Yes, I said, straightening in my chair, just thinking about what my husband would make of all this. Evelyn's expression softened slightly. This can't be easy for you, testifying against your own son. No, I agreed, but neither was discovering he'd stolen $72,000 from me. We spent the next hour going over my expected testimony. I would need to detail when and how I discovered the theft, confirm that I had never authorized Marcus to access my accounts, and describe the financial impact his actions had on my life. It would be straightforward but emotionally grueling. The defense has subpoenaed your financial records going back 10 years. Why? I asked, alarmed. They're likely looking for evidence that you've given Marcus money in the past. They'll try to establish a pattern of financial support to bolster their claim that this was just another form of help you were providing. I agree, Evelyn said, and the judge will likely see it that way too, but you should be prepared for them to paint you as a controlling mother who used money to manipulate her son. I left the meeting feeling drained. The idea that my past generosity toward Marcus could be weaponized against me was deeply unsettling. I had helped him over the years. Of course, what parent wouldn't? A loan for his first apartment security deposit, money toward his college textbooks, a contribution to the down payment on his condo. But these had been gifts freely given, not stolen under false pretenses. As I drove home, my phone rang. The car's Bluetooth system displayed county jail on the dashboard screen. Marcus had been calling regularly since his arraignment, and I had been answering less and less frequently. Today, I felt too emotionally raw to speak with him. I let it go to voicemail. At home, I found a package on my doorstep. The return address showed it was from Vanessa. Inside was a small potted orchid and a note. Thinking of you as the trial approaches. Stay strong. Over the past months, Vanessa and I had developed an unexpected friendship. We met for coffee every few weeks, comparing notes on our interactions with the legal system and supporting each other through the process. She had filed her own police report about the $20,000 Marcus had taken from her, adding another charge to his growing list of offenses. I placed the orchid on my kitchen windowsill and called to thank her. "It's nothing," she said when I expressed my gratitude. "I just thought you could use something beautiful in your life right now." "How are you holding up?" I asked. Vanessa would also be testifying at the trial. "Nervous," she admitted. "My parents are coming into town to support me. They're not thrilled about any of this." I could imagine. Vanessa had told me her parents were traditional, successful immigrants who had sacrificed everything to give their daughter opportunities. They had likely envisioned a different path for her than testifying against a boyfriend who had scammed her. "They'll be proud of you for standing up for yourself," I assured her, "just as I am." After we hung up, I checked my voicemail. Marcus's message was brief. "Mom, please call me back. I need to talk to you about something important. It's about Dad." The mention of Richard sent a chill through me. What could Marcus possibly have to say about his father that was relevant now? Despite my misgivings, I called the jail back and navigated the automated system to accept a call from Marcus. "Mom," he said when we were connected, relief evident in his voice. "Thank you for calling back." "You mentioned your father," I said, not wanting to engage in small talk. "What about him?" Marcus hesitated. "I've been doing a lot of thinking in here, about Dad, about you, about the kind of son I've been." I remained silent, wary of what seemed like the beginning of a manipulation. "Do you remember when I was 16 and Dad caught me taking money from your wallet?" he continued. The memory surfaced immediately. Richard had found Marcus with $60 he'd taken from my purse to buy concert tickets. It had been a relatively minor teenage transgression, but Richard had treated it with grave seriousness. "I remember," I said cautiously. "Dad made me work it off by doing chores for Mrs. Geller next door. Cleaning her gutters, mowing her lawn, washing her windows. It took weeks." Mrs. Geller had been our elderly neighbor, a widow with arthritis who struggled to maintain her home. Richard had arranged for Marcus to help her as restitution for the stolen money. "He told me something I've never forgotten," Marcus continued. "He said, 'The measure of a man isn't that he never makes mistakes, it's how he makes things right afterward.'" The words were so perfectly Richard that my eyes filled with tears. My husband had been a man of principle, someone who believed deeply in personal responsibility. "I've been a disappointment to both of you," Marcus said, his voice breaking. "I know that now, and I want to make it right." I gripped the phone tighter. "What are you saying, Marcus?" "I'm saying I did it. I stole the money, I forged your signature, I lied to you, and I'm so sorry." The admission I had been waiting for all these months finally came, and instead of satisfaction, I felt a profound sadness. "Why now, Marcus? Why admit it after all this time?" "Because I've had nothing but time to think in here," he said, "about who I am, about who I want to be. And I don't want to be the kind of man who steals from his own mother and then lies about it." I wanted to believe him. Part of Meth, a mother who had held him as a baby, taught him to read, cheered at his baseball games, desperately wanted to believe this was a genuine turning point. But the woman who had discovered his theft, who had been lied to repeatedly, who had watched him plead not guilty despite overwhelming evidence, remained skeptical. "What do you want from me, Marcus?" "I want to change my plea," he said. "I'm going to accept responsibility for what I did. I wanted you to hear it from me first. I wanted you to know that I understand now how much I hurt you." I closed my eyes, trying to process this development. "Have you told your lawyer?" Not yet. I wanted to talk to you first. Why? Not now. Maybe not for a long time, but someday. The question caught me off guard. Forgiveness had seemed so far away, so impossible, that I hadn't allowed myself to consider it. I don't know, I answered honestly. I want to believe you're sincere. I want to believe you can change. But you've broken my trust in so many ways, Marcus. I understand, he said, and for once I thought perhaps he did. I just needed you to know that I'm going to try to be better, to be the son Dad would have wanted me to be. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, turning the conversation over in my mind. Was Marcus truly remorseful, or was this another manipulation? Was he changing his plea because he had experienced a genuine moral awakening, or because his lawyer had advised him that the evidence was too damning to fight? I didn't have answers to these questions. All I knew was that for the first time in months, I felt a tiny flicker of hope that my son might find his way back to being the person I had raised him to be. The next day, Evelyn called to inform me that Marcus had indeed changed his plea to guilty. The sentencing would still proceed as scheduled, but there would be no trial. This is good news, she said. It spares you the ordeal of testifying, and it typically results in a somewhat lighter sentence. Did he say why he changed his plea? I asked. His attorney just said he wanted to take responsibility for his actions, Evelyn replied. It's not uncommon as trial dates approach and defendants face the reality of the evidence against them. I didn't share my conversation with Marcus. That felt private, something between mother and son that didn't need to be part of the legal proceedings. In the weeks leading up to the sentencing, I found myself in a strange emotional limbo. The relief of avoiding a trial was significant, but the reality that my son would soon be sentenced to prison weighed heavily on me. I alternated between anger at what he had done and grief for what might have been. Patricia suggested I write a victim impact statement for the sentencing hearing. It's your chance to tell the judge how this has affected you, she explained, not just financially, but emotionally. The idea appealed to me. I had been so focused on the practical aspects of the case, the evidence, the legal procedures, the financial impact, that I hadn't fully processed the emotional toll it had taken. I sat at my desk one evening, staring at a blank page, trying to find words for the complex mix of betrayal, disappointment, and lingering love I felt for my son. How could I express the devastation of discovering that the person I had trusted most had violated that trust so completely? How could I convey the sleepless nights, the constant anxiety about my financial future, the shame I felt when explaining to friends why Marcus was in jail? In the end, I wrote from the heart without filtering or softening the truth. I described the practical consequences, the reverse mortgage, the canceled health insurance, the constant fear of unexpected expenses. But I also wrote about the deeper wounds, the loss of trust, the questioning of my own judgment, the grief for the relationship we once had. When I finished, I read it over once, made a few small edits, and set it aside. Whether I would actually read it at the sentencing remained to be seen, but writing it had been cathartic. The day before the sentencing hearing, I received another call from the jail. This time, I answered immediately. "Mom," Marcus said, his voice tight with emotion. "I just wanted to hear your voice before tomorrow." "Are you nervous?" I asked. "Terrified," he admitted. "But I deserve whatever happens." His acceptance surprised me. "Your lawyer thinks the sentence will be on the lighter side since you changed your plea." We were quiet for a moment, the weight of tomorrow's proceedings hanging between us. "Will you be there?" he finally asked. "At the sentencing?" "Thank you," he whispered. "For everything. For not giving up on me completely." After we hung up, I went to my closet to select what I would wear the next day. I chose a simple gray dress, somber but dignified. As I laid it out, I noticed Richard's old briefcase on the top shelf. I hadn't used it since his death, but something compelled me to take it down now. Inside, I found his old notebook, filled with his neat handwriting lists, ideas, quotes he found meaningful. I flipped through it, finding comfort in this tangible connection to him. Near the back, a page caught my eye. Richard had written, "Teaching Marcus about consequences is the greatest gift we can give him. Without them, he'll never become the man he's capable of being." The words felt like a message across time, a validation of the difficult path I had chosen. Richard had understood something about our son that perhaps I had been too blind to see, that Marcus needed firm boundaries to become his best self. I placed the notebook in my purse to take with me the next day, a talisman of sorts. The morning of the sentencing dawned clear and cool. I dressed carefully, ate a light breakfast, and drove to the courthouse with Richard's notebook in my purse and his words in my heart. The courtroom was less crowded than I had expected. Evelyn nodded to me as I entered, indicating a seat in the front row. To my surprise, Vanessa was already there. "I thought you might want some support," she said as I sat beside her. Before I could respond, the bailiff called the court to order, and Judge Harriman entered. He was an older man, with silver hair and reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. Marcus was led and wearing an orange jumpsuit, his hands cuffed in front of him. He looked thinner than when I had last seen him, his face more angular, his eyes more haunted. When he saw me, he gave a small nod of acknowledgement. The proceedings began with formal statements from both attorneys. The prosecutor outlined the case against Marcus, emphasizing the breach of trust and the significant amounts stolen. Marcus's attorney spoke about his client's lack of prior criminal record, his guilty plea, and his expressed remorse. Then it was time for victim impact statements. Vanessa went first, describing how Marcus had gained her trust and then exploited it, taking her life savings under false pretenses. "The money is one thing," she concluded, her voice steady, "but the trust is something else entirely. That's a loss that can't be measured in dollars." When it was my turn, I approached the podium with my written statement in hand. But as I looked at Marcus, our eyes meeting across the courtroom, I set the paper aside. "Your Honor," I began, "I've been a teacher for 40 years. In that time, I've learned that education isn't just about books and tests. It's about learning to be a person of integrity and compassion. It's about understanding that our actions have consequences, both for ourselves and for others." I paused, gathering my thoughts. My son forgot those lessons. He chose to steal from Minot, a stranger, but his own mother. He took money I had saved over a lifetime of work, money meant to support me in my old age. The financial impact has been severe. I've had to take out a reverse mortgage on my home. I've had to cancel insurance policies. I live with constant anxiety about my future security. Marcus was looking down now, his shoulders hunched. "But the greater loss has been my trust and my peace of mind. I raised my son to be honest, to be responsible, to care about others. His actions showed a profound disregard for those values and for me as a person." I took a deep breath, feeling Richard's presence beside me. And yet, I stand here, not just as a victim, but as a mother who still loves her son despite his terrible choices. A mother who hopes that through facing the consequences of his actions, he might find his way back to being the person I know he can be. I looked directly at Marcus, who had raised his head to meet my gaze. "I don't ask for leniency, Your Honor. I ask for justice, the kind that allows for both accountability and redemption." As I returned to my seat, I saw tears streaming down Marcus's face. For the first time since this ordeal began, I believed they might be genuine. The judge then asked if Marcus wished to make a statement. He stood, hands still cuffed, and turned to face me rather than the judge. "Mom," he began, his voice breaking, "I'm so sorry. Not just for taking your money, but for betraying your trust, for making you worry about your future, for forcing you to be here today, watching your only child be sentenced for stealing from you." He paused, visibly struggling to maintain his composure. "I've had a lot of time to think about why I did what I did. The gambling was part of it. I got in deep, and I was desperate. But that's not the whole truth. The whole truth is that I've spent my life taking the easy way out, expecting others, especially you, to clean up my messes. I never learned to face consequences because you and Dad, especially after he was gone, always protected me from them." His words stung, but there was truth in them that I couldn't deny. He turned back to the judge. "I accept whatever sentence you give me, Your Honor. I deserve it, and I hope that someday I can be worthy of my mother's forgiveness." The courtroom was silent as Marcus sat down. Judge Harriman removed his glasses, studying Marcus thoughtfully. "Mr. Winters," he finally said, "identity theft is always a serious crime. When the victim is your own mother, it becomes something even more troubling. It speaks to a profound moral failure." Marcus nodded, accepting the rebuke. "However," the judge continued, "I do believe in the possibility of redemption. Your guilty plea and your statement today suggest you are beginning to understand the gravity of your actions." He put his glasses back on, consulting the papers before him. "I sentence you to 18 months in state prison, followed by 5 years of probation. You will make full restitution to both victims, plus interest. During your probation, you will attend mandatory gambling addiction counseling and perform 500 hours of community service, preferably working with elderly victims of financial crimes." The sentence was more severe than the plea deal had offered, but less than the maximum possible. It felt fair, substantial enough to impress the seriousness of the crime, but not so harsh as to foreclose the possibility of a meaningful future. As the bailiff led Marcus away, he looked back at me one last time. In his eyes, I saw something I hadn't seen in a long time, a glimmer of the son I remembered, the boy who had once understood right from wrong, the young man who had made his father proud. Outside the courthouse, Vanessa and I stood in the autumn sunshine, processing what had just happened. "Are you okay?" she asked gently. "I think so," I replied, surprised to find it was true. "It's not the ending I would have chosen for us, but maybe it's the one we needed." "What will you do now?" she asked. I thought about the long road ahead, 18 months of visiting my son in prison, of rebuilding my financial security, of learning to trust again. "I'm going to take it one day at a time," I said, "and I'm going to keep hoping that something good can come from all of this." As we parted ways, I opened Richard's notebook to the quote I had found the night before. "Teaching Marcus about consequences is the greatest gift we can give him." For the first time in months, I felt a sense of peace. Richard had been right, and though the lesson had come later and at a higher cost than either of us could have imagined, it had finally been delivered. Now it was up to Marcus to learn from it. 18 months can feel like an eternity or pass in the blink of an eye, depending on which side of the prison walls you stand. For me, it was a period of profound transformation, not just for Marcus, but for myself as well. I visited him every other Sunday without fail. The first few visits were awkward, filled with stilted conversation and long silences. What do you say to a son who stole your life savings? What does he say to the mother who put him behind bars? We navigated these uncharted waters carefully, each of us afraid of capsizing the fragile vessel of our rebuilding relationship. By the 3rd month, something shifted. Marcus had joined a prison support group for people with gambling addictions. The program forced him to confront the patterns that had led to his crimes, not just the gambling itself, but the entitlement, the magical thinking, the inability to face consequences. "I never understood how much Dad protected me," he told me during one visit, his prison uniform hanging loosely on his frame. "After he died, I expected you to take over that role. And when you did, I just kept pushing the boundaries further." His insight surprised me. I had never thought of my relationship with Marcus in those terms, but he wasn't wrong. Richard had been the disciplinarian in our family, the one who set firm boundaries. After his death, I had indeed slipped into a pattern of enabling, mistaking indulgence for love. I wanted to be both parents to you, I admitted. I think I overcompensated by being too permissive. That's not on you, Mom, Marcus said, meeting my eyes directly. I was a grown man making my own choices, bad ones. These conversations, painful as they were, began to heal something between us. Not the trust that would take much longer to rebuild, but the honesty that had been missing from our relationship for years. Outside the prison walls, I was rebuilding my life in other ways. Vanessa had made good on her offer to help me with financial planning. We met monthly to review my budget, explore options for supplementing my income, and create a strategy for my remaining years. You're actually in better shape than most people your age, she told me during one of our sessions. The reverse mortgage was a smart move given the circumstances, and your pension is solid. But I lost $72,000, I reminded her. That was supposed to be my safety net. And you'll get it back, she said confidently. Marcus's restitution payments will start as soon as he's released. In the meantime, we've cut your expenses and found that part-time tutoring job that brings in extra income. You're going to be okay, Eleanor. Her use of my first name caught me by surprise. Somewhere along the way, our professional relationship had evolved into friendship. Vanessa, 30 years my junior, had become one of my closest confidants. We shared not just the experience of being betrayed by Marcus, but a genuine affection that transcended our unusual connection. At 64, I found myself with an unexpected second act. The tutoring job Vanessa mentioned had blossomed into a small business. 3 afternoons a week, I worked with high school students preparing for college entrance exams. My decades of teaching experience made me a sought-after tutor, and word of mouth kept my schedule full. Patricia teased me about becoming an entrepreneur in retirement. Only you would turn a financial crisis into a business opportunity, she said over lunch one day. Necessity is the mother of invention, I replied with a small smile. Besides, it keeps my mind sharp. The truth was, I enjoyed the work. Each student who improved their scores, each college acceptance letter they proudly showed me, brought a satisfaction that reminded me why I had become a teacher in the first place. As Marcus's release date approached, our conversations turned increasingly toward the future. He would be on probation for 5 years, required to make monthly restitution payments, attend gambling addiction meetings, and complete his community service hours. I've been thinking about where to live, he said during one of our final visits. My condo was foreclosed on while I was in here. I was wondering if I could stay with you just until I get back on my feet. The request wasn't unexpected, but it still gave me pause. Having Marcus back in my home would be a test of our newly established boundaries. Could I trust him under my roof? Could I resist falling back into old patterns? I need to think about it, I told him honestly. That's a big step for both of us. He nodded, accepting my hesitation without argument, another sign of his growth. The old Marcus would have pushed, cajoled, made me feel guilty for not immediately agreeing. I discussed the dilemma with Patricia over coffee the next day. Are you out of your mind? She exclaimed when I told her I was considering it, after everything he did. He's changed, Pat, I said, though I understood her concern. The program has helped him understand his addiction and take responsibility for his actions. People don't change that much, she said skeptically, especially not in prison. Some do, I countered, and if I don't give him a chance, what was all this for? The arrest, the trial, the sentence, it was supposed to be about justice and rehabilitation, not just punishment. Patricia sighed, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. Just be careful, Ellie. I couldn't bear to see you hurt again. I appreciated her concern, but in the end, I made my decision. Marcus would stay with me, but under clear conditions. He would pay rent, contribute to household expenses, abide by a curfew during his probation, and most importantly, have no access to my financial information of any kind. I changed all my passwords, switched to a new bank, and installed a lock on my home office door where I kept important documents. Trust, but verify that would be our new normal. The day of Marcus's release dawned bright and clear, a perfect spring morning. I drove to the prison with a mix of anticipation and trepidation. Would the changes I'd observed during our visits hold outside the structured environment of incarceration? Would the son who was returning to me be the one who had shown remorse and growth, or would the old patterns reassert themselves? Marcus emerged from the prison gates carrying a small duffel bag containing his few possessions. He had gained back some of the weight he'd lost, and his hair was neatly trimmed. When he saw me waiting, his face lit up with a smile that reminded me of his childhood, open, genuine, without calculation. "Mom," he said simply, embracing me. "Thank you for coming." The drive home was quiet, both of us aware of the significance of this transition. As we passed familiar landmarks, the high school where I had taught, the park where Marcus had played as a child, the church where we had held Richard's funeral, I sensed Marcus taking it all in, reconnecting with the world he had been removed from. "Everything looks the same," he observed, "but different somehow." "It's not the world that's changed," I replied gently. "It's your perspective." He nodded, understanding. I never thought I'd say this, but going to prison might have been the best thing that ever happened to me. It forced me to look at myself, really look, for the first time in my life. At home, I showed Marcus to the guest room, which I had prepared with fresh linens and a few of his old possessions that I had kept: books, photographs, his high school baseball trophy. "I've made some chicken salad for lunch," I said, "and then we should go over the house rules." Marcus looked momentarily surprised, then nodded. "Of course, whatever you say, Mom." We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where I had confronted him about the theft nearly 2 years earlier. The symmetry wasn't lost on either of us. "First," I began, "you'll pay $500 a month in rent. That's below market rate, but it's what I need to help cover the mortgage." Marcus nodded without hesitation. "Second, you'll contribute to groceries and utilities. We'll split those 50-50. Another nod. "Third, you'll respect my privacy. My bedroom and office are off limits unless I invite you in. And you'll have no access to my financial information, no checkbooks, no credit cards, no account statements lying around." "I understand," he said quietly. "I wouldn't expect anything less." "Fourth, you'll continue your recovery program. I know your probation requires it, but I'm making it a condition of living here too. If you miss meetings or stop working the program, you'll need to find other accommodations." "That's fair," he agreed. "I want to stay in the program anyway. It's helped me more than I can say." "And finally," I said, "this is temporary. 6 months, maybe a year. You need to be working toward independence, finding a job, saving for your own place, rebuilding your life." Marcus met my gaze steadily. "I promise, Mom, I won't let you down this time." I wanted to believe him. Part of me did believe him, but another part, the part that had been so deeply wounded by his betrayal, remained cautious. "Actions, not words," I said, echoing a phrase his father had often used. "Show me who you are now, through what you do, not what you say." The first month of our new arrangement went smoothly. Marcus found a job at a local hardware store, not glamorous work, but steady employment that accommodated his probation requirements. He paid his rent on time, attended his meetings, and respected the boundaries I had established. I watched him carefully, looking for signs of the old patterns, the charm when he wanted something, the evasiveness when confronted with difficulties, the subtle manipulations. But they seem to have been replaced by a new straightforwardness, a willingness to face problems head-on rather than sidestep them. One evening, about 6 weeks after his release, Marcus came home looking troubled. He sat heavily at the kitchen table while I prepared dinner. "Everything okay?" I asked, noticing his expression. "I ran into an old friend today," he said. "Someone I used to gamble with. He wanted me to come over for a poker game tonight. Said it was just for fun, low stakes." My heart sank. This was exactly the kind of temptation I had feared. "And what did you tell him?" "I said no, of course," Marcus replied. "But it was harder than I expected. For a minute there, I could feel that old rush, that excitement at the prospect of a game." His honesty surprised me. The old Marcus would have hidden the encounter, perhaps even gone to the game secretly. "That's normal," I said, setting aside the salad I was making to sit across from him. "Addiction doesn't just disappear. The program teaches you that, right?" He nodded. "They say the cravings will always be there to some degree. The trick is developing better coping mechanisms." He smiled ruefully. "Still, I wanted you to know. No secrets this time." "I appreciate that," I said, and I meant it. As the months passed, these moments of vulnerability and honesty became more frequent. Marcus shared his struggles openly, the challenge of working a minimum wage job in his 30s, the shame he felt when running into old colleagues, the daily battle against his gambling urges. In turn, I began to share more with him about my own challenges, the financial anxiety his theft had created, the embarrassment I felt explaining his absence to friends and neighbors, the trust issues that now colored not just our relationship but all my interactions. Slowly, carefully, we were rebuilding not just trust, but understanding. For perhaps the first time in our adult relationship, we were seeing each other clearly, not as idealized versions or through the distorting lens of expectation, but as flawed, complex human beings capable of both terrible mistakes and genuine growth. 6 months after Marcus's release, Vanessa suggested a meeting to discuss the restitution payments. Marcus had been faithfully setting aside a portion of each paycheck, but the total repayment would take years at his current rate. "I've been reviewing your financial situations," Vanessa said as the three of us sat in her office, "and I have a proposal that might work for everyone." She laid out a plan. Marcus would increase his monthly payments slightly, supplemented by a percentage of any bonuses or salary increases he received in the future. In return, I would forgive the interest on the debt, reducing the total amount he needed to repay. "This accomplishes two things," Vanessa explained. "It gives Marcus a clear, achievable repayment plan, and it ensures that Eleanor receives the full principal amount of what was taken." I looked at Marcus, who was studying the proposal with intense concentration. "What do you think?" I asked him. "I think it's more than fair," he said. "More than I deserve, honestly. But I'm committed to paying back every penny, however long it takes." The sincerity in his voice moved me. This was not the entitled young man who had once dismissed my financial concerns with a casual, "You're healthy as a horse." This was someone who understood the value of money earned through honest work, the importance of meeting obligations, the meaning of integrity. "I accept the proposal," I said, looking at Vanessa, "and I appreciate you putting this together for us." As we left the office, Marcus turned to me. "I've been thinking about moving out," he said. "I've saved enough for a security deposit on a small apartment. It's not much, but it would be a start." I felt a surprising pang at the thought. Despite my initial reservations, having Marcus in the house had been largely positive. He had become helpful around the home, taking on repairs that had been neglected since Richard's death, cooking dinner on the nights I taught late, providing companionship that I hadn't realized I was missing. "You don't have to rush," I said. "The agreement was for up to a year." "I know," he replied. but part of recovery is standing on my own 2 feet, and I think it's time. I recognized in his words an echo of the independence I had always tried to instill in him. If you're sure, then I support your decision. But know that you're welcome to stay longer if you need to. The apartment Marcus found was a modest one-bedroom in a working-class neighborhood, not far from the hardware store where he worked. I helped him move in, bringing some kitchen items and linens I could spare. The place was sparsely furnished, just a bed, a small table with 2 chairs, and a used sofa he had found at a thrift store. "It's not much," he said apologetically as we stood in the center of the living room. "It's a beginning," I corrected him. "Your beginning." As I was leaving, Marcus handed me an envelope. "What's this?" I asked. "Open it when you get home," he said. Inside my car, curiosity got the better of me. I opened the envelope to find a check for $700 more than his regular monthly restitution payment. Attached was a note. "Mom, I got a small bonus at work for perfect attendance. I want every extra penny to go toward repaying what I took from you. This doesn't begin to make up for what I did, but I hope it shows that I'm committed to making things right. Love, Marcus." Tears blurred my vision as I started the car. The amount wasn't large in the grand scheme of things, but the gesture spoke volumes. This was restitution in its truest sense, not just repayment of money, but a restoration of values, a rebuilding of character. Over the next year, Marcus continued to surprise me with his transformation. He was promoted at the hardware store to assistant manager, allowing him to increase his restitution payments. He completed his community service hours working with a program that helped elderly victims of financial fraud, finding unexpected fulfillment in using his own experience to prevent others from being victimized. Most significantly, he maintained his sobriety from gambling, even when faced with temptations and opportunities. When he received his 1-year chip from Gamblers Anonymous, he asked me to attend the ceremony, the first time he had invited me into that part of his life. "I'm proud of you," I told him afterward as we shared coffee at a nearby diner. "Your father would be proud too." Marcus looked down at the chip in his hand, turning it over thoughtfully. I think about him a lot. About what he would say if he could see what I did, who I became. "He would have been devastated by your choices," I said honestly, "but he would be amazed by your courage in facing the consequences and changing your path." "Do you think he would have forgiven me?" Marcus asked, vulnerability naked in his eyes. I considered the question carefully. Richard had been a man of principle, but also of compassion. "Yes," I said finally. "He would have. It might have taken time, but he would have seen what I see now that you're not the same person who committed those crimes." "And you, Mom?" Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Have you forgiven me?" The question hung between us, weighty with all the pain and growth of the past 2 years. Had I forgiven him? Could I ever fully trust him again? The answers weren't simple. "I'm getting there," I said truthfully. "Every time you follow through on a promise, every time you choose integrity over expediency, every time you show me who you're becoming rather than who you wear it, heals something between us." He nodded, accepting this partial answer as the best I could offer for now. "That's all I can ask for," he said, "the chance to keep showing you." 2 years after Marcus's release from prison, I received an unexpected call from Evelyn Marsh, the district attorney who had prosecuted his case. "Mrs. Winters," she said warmly, "I hope I'm not disturbing you." "Not at all," I assured her, curious about the reason for her call. "I'm reaching out because we're organizing a panel discussion on financial crimes against seniors, particularly those committed by family members. Given your experience and how you've handled it, we thought you might be willing to participate." The request took me by surprise. "I'm not sure what I could contribute," I said hesitantly. "Your perspective is invaluable," Evelyn insisted. Many victims of these crimes never report them because they're ashamed or want to protect their family members. Your willingness to hold your son accountable while still maintaining a relationship with him is exactly the kind of nuanced approach we want to highlight. I thought about it for a moment. Would Marcus be involved? Actually, yes, Evelyn replied. We were hoping both of you might participate. His perspective as someone who committed such a crime and has worked to make amends could be powerful. But of course, we understand if that's not comfortable for either of you. I promised to discuss it with Marcus and get back to her. That evening, I called him to explain the invitation. A panel discussion? He repeated, sounding uncertain. Talking about what I did? Yes, I confirmed. But also about rehabilitation, restitution, rebuilding trust. They think our story might help others in similar situations. There was a long pause. Do you want to do it? He finally asked. I'm considering it, I said, but only if you're comfortable with it too. This would mean publicly discussing what happened. Most people in town already know, Marcus pointed out. It was in the local paper when I was arrested. This would be different, I cautioned. More detailed, more personal. And it would be recorded for educational purposes. Another pause. If it could help prevent someone else from making the mistakes I made, or help another family navigate the aftermath, then yes, I think we should do it. The panel discussion was scheduled for a month later at the community college. As the date approached, Marcus and I met several times to discuss what we would share and how we would present our story. These conversations were sometimes painful, forcing us to revisit the darkest moments of our relationship, but they were also healing in their honesty. On the evening of the event, I felt a flutter of nerves as we took our seats on the stage. The auditorium was nearly full social workers, law enforcement officers, financial advisors, and ordinary citizens interested in protecting themselves or their loved ones from financial exploitation. Evelyn introduced the panel, which included not just Marcus and me, but also a detective specializing in elder fraud, a psychologist who worked with families affected by financial crimes, and Vanessa, representing the financial industry's perspective on preventing such crimes. When it was our turn to speak, I went first, describing the discovery of the theft, the difficult decision to file charges, and the long road to rebuilding trust. The easiest thing would have been to stay silent, I told the audience, to absorb the loss and protect my son from consequences, but that would have protected him from growth as well. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do for someone is to let them face the results of their actions. Marcus spoke next, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his face. 2.5 years ago, I committed a terrible crime against the person who loved me most in the world, he began. I stole my mother's retirement savings to feed a gambling addiction and a lifestyle I couldn't afford. I told myself it wasn't really stealing because she was my mother, because I intended to pay it back someday, because I deserved it somehow. He paused, looking out at the audience. I was wrong. What I did was theft, plain and simple, and the consequences of that theft went far beyond the money I took. I destroyed trust that had been built over a lifetime. I caused financial hardship and emotional pain to someone who had given me nothing but love and support. As Marcus continued, describing his arrest, imprisonment, and the hard work of recovery and restitution, I watched the audience. They were rapt, moved by his candor and evident remorse. The most important lesson I've learned, he concluded, is that genuine amends aren't about words. They're about actions sustained over time. Every day, I try to be worthy of the second chance I've been given, not just with my mother, but in all areas of my life. During the question and answer session that followed, someone asked me the question I had been anticipating: have you forgiven your son? I looked at Marcus, seated beside me, and in that moment, I knew the answer with absolute clarity. Yes, I said simply. I have forgiven him. Not because what he did wasn't serious, it was. Not because the consequences weren't real, they were, and in some ways we're still living with them. I've forgiven him because he has earned that forgiveness through consistent, meaningful actions that demonstrate true change. I reached over and took Marcus's hand. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or pretending it never happened. It means choosing to see the person before you now, rather than defining them forever by their worst mistake. As we left the stage after the panel concluded, Marcus embraced me tightly. "Thank you," he whispered, "for everything, for the tough love, for the second chance, for saying what you said tonight." "I meant every word," I assured him. Outside the auditorium, several attendees approached us to share their own stories, parents whose children had stolen from them, adult children concerned about elderly parents being exploited, professionals seeking to better understand the family dynamics involved in such cases. One elderly woman gripped my hand tightly. "My daughter took my savings last year," she confided. "I was too ashamed to tell anyone, let alone press charges. But listening to you tonight, I realize I'm not helping her by protecting her from consequences." "It's the hardest decision I ever made," I told her, "but also the right one for both of us." As Marcus and I drove home that night, a sense of peace settled over me. The journey had been long and painful, but we had emerged on the other side not unchanged, but perhaps stronger for having weathered the storm together. "Do you ever regret it?" Marcus asked suddenly. "Reporting me to the police?" I considered the question carefully. "No," I said finally. "It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but I don't regret it. Look at who you are now, Marcus. Look at who we are together. Would we have found this honesty, this mutual respect, if I had just let it go?" He was quiet for a moment, then shook his head. "No, I would have kept taking the easy way out, and you would have kept enabling me. We needed to break that cycle." As we pulled into my driveway, the porch light welcomed us home that was once again filled with trust, respect, and the kind of love that wants the best for the other person, even when that means walking the hardest path. "Will you stay for coffee?" I asked as we got out of the car. "I'd like that," Marcus replied. Together, we walked toward the house, mother and son, each changed by the journey we had taken, each grateful for the chance to begin again.